Hello, my name is Catherine Charles, and I am 77 years old. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I was born on Bergen Street, as I recall, at least that's what I remember they told me, to Edward and Catherine Durkin. My mother's maiden name was Hart, which makes her pretty Irish, and so does Durkin make my father Irish.
What year did your relatives or your ancestors come over to America?
What year?
Do you know?
My father's people they came from Scranton. They were, I guess they were third generation, second generation. We were third generation. I have a picture, and you've never seen it. I have a picture of when I visited as about 3 years old, I guess, in my grandmother's Durkin's backyard. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather is on there, he had a mustache, and my grandmother looked like used to be an ad for Mrs. Smith's Pies, mm-hmm. and she was a little rotund individual with gray hair, and very lovable,
What was their family business, or
what was the
real estate, I guess?
I think she was the one with the brains. Uh-huh. I think she was the one that knew what to do with her money and so forth. Imagine raising all those children and then to have people help you clean and have a laundress that came in, even though you're at the next scrub board with her, has to say something, that she had a wise head on her shoulders. But I'll have to tell you something funny about her. For some reason, my mother's name was Catherine Elizabeth, mm-hmm. but for some reason she called my mother Lily. It was the craziest thing, and in turn she called me Lily. When I would go there to visit, she'd call Lily. Well, I was Lily. I'd run there. We never figured that one out. The Durkin family, my father's side, I said they all came from Scranton, uh-huh. and they were living. People in this area would know. They owned property on the Kresge. They owned property next to the Kresge people, which were a very wealthy family. And at that time, they didn't have churches, or the church might have been so far away that they would hold their mass in the hills. They'd set up an altar, and that's where they would have their masses. And some of my father's cousins became missionary priests. I remember meeting them. There was one at his funeral. I remember that. And I forget what his name was, because that would give you another little insight as to background names, but it doesn't really mean that much to the story, But anyway, these are the different things that they talked about. But there was a great bit of pride for my mother, because she had married apparently into a family that was a little on the wealthy side, where her father and they were struggling. And sometimes she got in fights later on that I can recall, and it even came to light as long ago, as I would say maybe 5 years ago. I heard something from my nephew's wife, believe it or not, asking about who were the Durkins, what were they like. And I think it was rubbed on their nose, somehow rubbed on them a little bit that yes, my mother had married a family that was known, or however, whatever. And so I had a very different childhood, because I would go, being the only girl after 3 boys, I would go to visit with my grandma Durkin, and they lived in a brownstone home.
In Scranton or
in Brooklyn,
okay.
And on Bergen Street. Now she's the one that owned the properties, and this home I can remember so vividly because it had maids' quarters upstairs. That was on the 3rd floor. They had these gates that you see now if you take a tour that are barred, and you go down the steps and you could go into the bottom, which would be the dining room and the kitchen area, and then they had these beautiful stoops up the front with gorgeous opening doors, glass doors, etched doors. that would go into the formal part of the home, which consisted of a beautiful, beautiful living room, which was strictly to sit and admire, and it had a huge mirror. I would say the mirror was as large as this paneling here and higher.
Wow.
And I can remember that in the center of the room there was a little kissing seat. In other words, it was curved like this. So the boy sat here and the girl sat here.
Here.
At least that was my thoughts about it. So you can see that they could kiss here on the slide, you know. Now that impressed me greatly. And the room itself, the furnishings were absolutely gorgeous. And then going away from that room, there was a small library. And it had a table in the center with a Tiffany light on it. And books, loads of books, shelves of books. I can remember that. And in that family, there were 3 girls and 5 boys.
And your
My father's family.
Okay.
And they were all very, very prim and proper. And believe me, when we went to visit, we were put on our best behavior. And I remember my brothers dreading going because they had to kiss everybody. Oh, Mom, we have to go around the room and kiss everybody. But they loved us dearly because we were there were only 2 brothers and 1 sister that married. So, of course, any descendants of theirs were loved by them, you know. So I remember this. And then beyond this library was this music room. There was a baby grand piano in the music room. And my one uncle was the pianist. He was the one, that was his livelihood as time went on. His name was Frank Durkin.
Okay.
And he supposedly was the composer of Dardanella, and it supposedly was stolen from him. You wouldn't know what that is, but that was a popular song. And so I kind of feel that you, young lady, that your father's talents descended from your Uncle Frank. Had to.
Uh-huh.
And so anyway, that takes care of that part of the floor. Then beyond that, there were bedrooms, huge bedrooms, where the boys were quartered. And since my grandmother was widowed at an early age, her oldest daughter and she shared a bedroom, and there was a prayer bench, kneeling. I can remember kneeling down there, and this beautiful furniture. Again, Victorian furniture that I loved. You know. So that's my impression of that house. And downstairs in the kitchen, there was a formal dining room, and then there was a little cove where their tablecloths were rolled on rollers when they were ironed, and my grandmother would work with the laundress. She had a laundress that came, and she stood side by side with her, scrubbing the clothes, and this woman did the ironing, and then this is how they were maintained. And I remember all of us sitting down in this huge kitchen for dinner, and my job was to place the napkins that were in napkin rings, see who needed a change of napkin if it was soiled, and each one had their own letter. Now this is a woman who had that many children, and she wanted to instill on her family.
She had 8? Or?
She had 11 because she had twins and one of them died. But she wanted to instill in her children etiquette and things like that. And on my mother's side, they were great people. You know, they were all great people. But I think my mother probably would talk about this a little bit too much to suit them, you know, and they'd get a little angry with it. I don't recall when my grandmother Hart came over. That I wouldn't know. But she lived to be 97 years old. And she was always dying. That was the word. The word would be Mrs. Hart, who would be helping these people deliver babies, would be called, and someone would say, "Oh, her heart was bad." She had 11 children, but they would always say that. And she had a great sense of humor. She would say, "You know, did I ever tell you the story about the time I went to my own wake?" She said the rumor was that Mrs. Hart had died. And all these people were coming to my house because they thought I had died.
Is this true?
And that was true.
Wow.
Yeah. That's something that she told. She was a great old lady, as I remember.
And what was her first name?
Her name was, well, it must have been Elizabeth because they called her Lizzie Hart. So it had to be, she was probably Elizabeth Catherine. My mother was Catherine Elizabeth. I am Catherine Elizabeth, and my granddaughter is Elizabeth Catherine. All stemming from my grandmother. But another thing about her humor, I don't want to dwell too much on the one thing.
That's
but
fine.
the one thing about this humorous woman was the fact that there was a bridal shower for one of her grandchildren, and at this point in time, she was pretty well up there, and I'm not saying that she liked a little nip. I'm not saying that at all. However, she had such a great ability to be social with you and whatever. And I remember her being in the kitchen of this apartment where the shower was held, and she asked, I guess they had champagne, and she asked for she wanted a sip of champagne. And she took it to her lips, and she said, "Now watch out that my mother doesn't come." Now her mother was my mother. In other words, my mother was mothering her at that point in time. And so, she was a funny person. So I don't know how much further you want to go about childhood or what we did, or what's the question?
Well, actually, since you were talking about your grandmother, what was her maiden name?
Her name was O'Hagan.
O'Hagan?
Yeah, because my godmother was an O'Hagan and was a cousin of my grandmother, so it was O'Hagan and Hart. That's right.
Did Lizzie Hart come over on the boat, or?
Yes, she did, and that's an interesting story about her, because as we well know, in Ireland there was this great division of the Protestants and the Catholics, and she had a father who was very domineering, and he forbade her to speak to a Protestant child, I guess, and or vice versa too. It could be that way too. So there were times that she would have to cross the street, and that would happen. So when she met my grandfather, they were very young, and her father was, like she said, my father was a devil. So what happened to her was they were courting, and they were very young, and they would leave notes in a certain area in a tree. He would leave a note for her, and she'd leave a note for him in return. And he made arrangements.
Was he Protestant?
Pardon?
Was he Protestant?
No, he was Catholic.
Oh, okay.
No, but they were too young to be married. That was the thing. They wanted to get married, and of course the father objected. So what they did is they would have this one certain tree that they would leave notes for each other, and they planned that he would come to America, and then that he had relatives here, and that when he was settled and he could bring her over, he would send for her. And I guess maybe they were, she might have been 16, 17 years old. And that's what happened. Then she came to this country and lived with a relative here of his, and they married, so forth. My mother's father was a what do you call them when they put shoes on a horse?
Blacksmith?
A what?
Blacksmith?
Not a blacksmith. He took care of the horses, shoed the horses, and ran them and whatever.
Have you ever met her parents? Had you ever met them? Did they ever come over to America?
No, they would have been dead by the time I was born. I don't really know. I never gave that a thought.
I guess going back, when you said that Lizzie Hart came over to America, but you don't know exactly, you said that the Durkins came out of Scranton.
The Durkins...
But originally, obviously from Ireland, but you don't know.
Well, as my ancestors, they were born in this country. mean,
Right.
where the rest, prior to that, I don't know.
So do
But
you
but
think
that was, I remember that and as I say, unfortunately, Frank knew a lot of things, and I was always sorry. I did try, to get things down and try to get families, like a little family tree and all. He knew a lot more than I did, and I never could get to him enough, to compare notes on it. I have it written down somewhere.
Do you think maybe they came over during the potato famine?
Who knows? Could be.
Perhaps earlier. You really don't even know. You wouldn't even be able to make a guess.
No, I just know that that if they lived like that in Scranton, where they had to say mass on the hillside and all, that's got to go back a long way.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know what the family trade was?
What the trade was?
Yeah. Were they farmers or?
No, I don't know that.
What did your father do?
My father worked for the Brooklyn Navy Yard. He was a sheet metal worker. He was always, he was a good provider, strictly a family man. Just loved his family, and just sort of went about his business, read his evening paper and whatever, without shovel the snow. In the Depression days, when things were really, really bad, and you didn't have a job or whatever, my father would like it to snow because he could make $1 a day shoveling the streets, and he would go out and do that. I mean, this was a very proud man, a man that had always provided for his family. Of course, that all left and everything was fine, but so there was a variation of people in that family. I mean, there was the two that married and had children were my father and my Uncle John, of the boys. And there was Walter, Frank, Joe,
What did
and
they
they
do?
never married. They went off to war, World War I, and we have a picture of them coming down Fifth Avenue. There's just a little shot of them marching, when the war was over. What I know from Ireland, what I hear about the Irish boys, they claim the mothers all hung on to the boys. That's why they were always 28 or 30 before they got married. But nobody ever, I mean, it was a great thing to live in a family where you had a bachelor uncle, and they called them old maids then, and an old maid aunt, because you were the light of their life. As a child, you personified everything that you could for them, other than being parents.